You're listening to Rise Up, stories of recovery, resilience, and renewal with Matthew Taub.
All right, I want to thank you for coming and join me today on Rise Up, stories of recovery, renewal, and resilience. Today, my guest is Brad Lamm. Brad Lamm is an author, a teacher, and interventionist. He's best known for helping people make life-enhancing changes. He's been on the Dr. Phil show today. The doctors, Brad's mission is to help families have more good, less bad in their lives. I want to welcome you, Brad, to the podcast. As Oprah calls you, America's interventionist. So let's start off with your own journey. Your recovery began in 2003 from drugs, bulimia, nicotine, and alcohol. Let's talk a bit about you and let's hear your story, Brad.
Right on. Well, thanks for letting me join you today. And I bring greetings from just down south. I'm in New England right now, so I'm sure happy to join you. I love Canada. And I didn't really do much mischief there, but in the U.S., before I got sober, I was, I just, like so many people, I think, in fact, most people who suffer with mental health and addiction, I was right there in plain sight. I had a job, I had friends, I had family that I didn't see that much. But, some of those circles got smaller and smaller, but I just plugged away. I wasn't making headlines, I wasn't getting arrested. I was just, sort of like decompensating more and more. And by that I mean, I was just having a hard time getting through life without a 2-pack a day cigarette habit. Methamphetamines, which I've accidentally gotten addicted to and I couldn't stop. And the way I drank alcoholically, I drank just like I had a wooden leg. I just could drink and drink and drink. And with meth, I could drink even more. And that's just how it happened. I think if you had stopped me on the street during that time, I would have, told you such a different story because I thought it was just the way it was always going to be. I had tried to stop so many times. I had tried 12-step recovery. I'd gone to AA in the early 90s in New York City and was like, that's not for me. But of course I was drinking through it all. And there I was. It was the summer of 2002, Matthew. And I had lost my dream job, which was I was a weather anchor at a network affiliate in Washington, D.C. And it was my top 10 market. I loved that job. I thought it was like, if you asked me a few years before, what is your dream? It was like, I'm going to get to a top 10 market. I'm going to do this. I'm going to kill this, And I lost that job. I couldn't keep it together to the extent that I could show up, be dependable, and not pass out on live television. And then, it started to turn, like so many people's stories start to turn around, change, when a friend just wouldn't take no for an answer. I had a disastrous July 4th, and it wasn't disastrous I hit somebody with my car and I went to jail. It was just, I got really loaded, like most days. I was asked to leave the establishment that I owned. It was a nightclub in DC. And my business partner the next day on the 5th, I was sleeping, don't wake me up. He kept calling and finally I picked up. I'm like, hey, Eric, trying to sound like I was okay. And he said, yeah, hey, we have to meet for lunch. Hey, I'm sick. I'm not going to make it in today. Plus it's a holiday. And he's like, no, we're going to meet for lunch. And it was an intervention because he would not take no for an answer. It was that was the conversation starter. Okay, you said no, and we're meeting for lunch in 45 minutes. So I showed up, I sat down, and I just felt awful. I didn't have a clear picture of what had happened the night before, but I knew that it wasn't good. I had sort of a foggy memory of no good. Saying things I didn't, as a human being, without being loaded, I wouldn't say to other people. Behaving in ways that without being loaded, I wouldn't behave that way to other living creatures. And that day was the first time I told him, because he said, I think you're an alcoholic. And I said, well, you don't know the half of it. I've actually got a methamphetamine addiction. I can't stop. That's the real problem. That's what I told him. I'm not really an alcoholic, but I am a meth addict, And I really did think that, and honestly, if I looked at the hierarchy of bad, like what would kill me the fastest, cigarettes you can smoke for years before you get lung cancer and it gets grisly. Alcohol, you can just plug away. But meth, if you're doing meth every day, it starts to catch up with you mentally and physically. And I had developed this really noticeable facial tic, Matt. So if you talk to me for any length of time, I would do this thing like I was, either winking at you or you thought he has a neurological disorder. And so there was like this feature that had emerged, and I really thought, God, if I could just quit meth, that would, I'd be so much better. And so it started that day. Kind of cool that it was my Independence Day, July 5th. I even, sort of memorialized it like, this is it. I'm going to do this. And I called and got a therapist that day. I went to a 12-step recovery program for people that struggle with methamphetamine. And that's how it started for me. I had not, to this day, it's more than 20 years later, I have not put methamphetamine in my body. And that's not my sober date. That's not when I stopped drinking. I plugged along. I was making a little bit of progress. I was super pissed, though. I would go to meetings with like Miller Lite beer hats and like drug paraphernalia T-shirts, like with marijuana leaves on them and stuff. And I was just so mad. If you looked at me sideways, I was just, like the angry guy in the Jeep. And
been there.
Plus, people knew me from TV. They knew me from doing the weather in DC, and so I felt like this whole anonymity thing didn't really happen for me. Like, I didn't get anonymity, so fuck you. I was really like, I had a real chip on my shoulder that this thing that you have, I don't have, and so this isn't probably going to work for me. And I got asked to leave meetings a couple times and to take off a hat that, had drug or alcohol symbols on it. And I cried, Matt. I cried and cried and cried. In turns, I'd be like ready for a fight. And then I would just be sitting there crying, just like crying my eyes out. And I suffered so much then, and so that's how it went for me. Until February, I was on again, off again with alcohol. And when I say on again, off again with alcohol, it was heavy usage. So I would not drink for 5 or 6 days. I would count days. I was trying to not drink too, because I was being told by the people that I was meeting that, it was unlikely that I was going to stay stopped with the meth if I didn't deal with the alcohol thing too. Right. And so I didn't think it would work for me, but I was like trying to do it really because I had this external leverage from my business partner saying, hey, you've got to get this figured out. You have got to get this figured out. And so he was the only one that I talked to outside of that recovery clan. My family didn't know yet. I only had a couple of real good friends. They didn't know yet that I had stopped using meth, or that I'd even started using meth, And so it came around, it was about 6 months later, it was 1st of February in 2003. And I had a really hard time just having a couple drinks. I would have like 10 drinks. I would just get totally polluted. Stay in a hotel in DC instead of going, driving back out to the house in Virginia. And it was just diabolical. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why in the world I could not moderate how I drank. And so I made plans to go to rehab because I was forced to. Right. Really, my business. The same guy, Eric, said, hey, you got to go to rehab. I had a boy on the meth, but you've got to go to rehab. This alcohol thing is really brutal for you, and I'm not going to work with you anymore if you don't do this. So I got intervened on to go to rehab. That's how it started for me. And since that day, on February 4th, when I had a few drinks on that airplane flying to California for treatment, because it was warm. That's the only reason I picked the place I was going, because it was right on the beach and it was warm. I haven't had a drink, and it's coming up on 20 years, which is remarkable. I thought that the 30 days would be, trend setting, and it was for me. I wasn't able to put sober time together, so putting days together and then weeks together and then months together and then coming to that first year mark, it really lit my fire that I maybe worked to the extent that I could have a little bit of hope. And I still, Matt, I just cried and cried and cried and cried. In fact, like thinking about it now, it was so hard that first year. It was so hard, man. And when I hear people say that, they were struck sober, wasn't my story, man. I mean, I stayed sober, but on day 107, I made plans to kill myself because I was in that much emotional pain. And, we've all seen people who suffer in different ways, and mine was just this like brutal, grotesque, demasculating, snot coming out of my nose. I was either raging at you, like literally yelling at people in random places, or I was just sobbing, and I was in so much emotional pain that I had to do another thing. I had to get a different kind of help for that. It wasn't just taking the drugs and alcohol away and going to 12-step meetings wasn't treating that condition.
Yeah.
And so, good news is I got better. A couple years in, I quit smoking. About the same time, I started dealing with an eating disorder that had been with me since I was 13. And I just plugged away. But I think I'm lucky in some ways. I'm a white guy that had money to go to rehab. I think that really saved my life. I'm a person that had some resources to get good trauma therapy. I don't think that I was like, I honestly, I don't think that there's any like preordained plan for me. Like, you got sober so you could help people. I actually don't believe that. I believe that all of us have inherent worth and value, and we're all destined to have like a beautiful, clunky, weird life if we have a little bit of luck. And thank goodness, I had a lot of luck that helped me get through the times where it was really hard, and I thought I can't make it another day. But that first year was really, it was nothing to write home about. It was a lot of pain, and I'm super grateful that I didn't take my life because it was really, really hard.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. It's not funny you said it, but I was recently last night, and again, somebody who had survived suicide, and they said, that if you have a wound, how much it hurts, like the pain you have, the physical pain you have, you just want it out of you. You just want it gone. Right? And then, when you think of somebody who wants to take their own life, they just want that pain gone. He said, imagine the pain you have that you just want, like, amputate my arm because I got to get rid of this pain. He said the emotional pain, he says, was 1,000,000 times worse than the physical pain that we feel from injuries or whatnot, or any illness. He goes, it's that much worse. So when you say, like, it wasn't just getting rid of the alcohol and the meth and the cigarettes and everything else, it was the trauma and the emotional behind it that you had to get through, which was the hardest.
Well, look, no doubt that stuff helped a lot, right? If I had kept doing meth and being secretive and driving while impaired, odds are I would have got arrested. I would have gone to jail or prison. I would have hurt somebody. I would have lost more. But it didn't, and so I started on this journey, and I felt really lucky, and I didn't want to screw it up because I had this idea that it was super fresh and fragile, and the potential that I would make it, that it would keep working. I had a little bit of hope, but I thought I'm on borrowed time here. If I can just keep it another day, that would be awesome. And I think of something that happened. Maybe I was 90 days sober. It was before maybe it was 4 months. So maybe after that day 107. But I was in an IKEA in Maryland, and I was shopping. I got back from rehab, and I found out that my partner had fallen in love with somebody else, and which was like a bummer. What could be worse?
Right.
Well, I'll tell you what could be worse if you get loaded, right? And so I found myself having to get home furnishings, and I'm at an IKEA with a friend who's also in recovery, and I let this lady have it. I yelled. I was just a dick, and I felt so bad then after it. And my friend Mark, he said, and I said, this is the kind of stuff that I want to drink over, and I keep doing it. I can't stop doing it. I keep doing this stuff. And he said, well, this is sort of advanced recovery, what I'm going to tell you, but you could go up to her and try to make it right. Well, how would I do that?
Yeah.
And he told me the script. He said, hello, may I talk to you for a second? I'm very sorry. And that was the first part. And then she said no, like I couldn't force it. I had to walk away. So then she said yes. And the second part was, I'm a person in early recovery from drugs and alcohol. I'm trying to change, and I'm really sorry that I've treated you this way. I just started crying. And she said, I have a brother in recovery. And I said, is there anything I can do to make it up to you? Which was part of the script that my friend told me to say. And she said, no, just go away, but it's okay. And, yeah. She was like, okay, but no.
Yeah.
And, that was my first amends, where I learned a new behavior. And there's this saying in recovery that if you're in a 12-step program, you're likely to hear, situations which used to baffle you, you will instinctively know how to handle. Mm-hmm. And soon after that day at IKEA, and as I do the math, I was like 4 months sober. I said I did something, and I wasn't to the amends part of my recovery program, but I did something that I felt awful about. And then right after that, I did something different that it hit me that I had just instinctively done something which used to baffle me, like which I used to get loaded or I would rage over, etc. And I was so delighted. I told my friend, I said, oh my God, do you know what just happened? He said, what? I said, I just was able to handle a situation which used to baffle me and which I would get loaded over shit like that. And so there were like, sort of monumental but little things that were part of my chess game. As I, just stayed committed and showed up to play, life, really.
Yeah, it's life. It's all the stuff that we just are that group that just didn't deal with it. And I know that rage in that, and I'll even say after almost 17 years for me, that rage is like right here. I can feel it. Like it's still there.
Yeah.
It's knowing how that this is not what I'm going to do.
It's so interesting. I have a really good friend, one of my best friends. Her name is Deb Hughes, and she has seen me. She's known me like 15 years, and she's seen me pop a little, and I see her a lot, and over the years, she's seen me pop less frequent. It's not a full pop. It's like a pre-pop. But she has helped me because she'll help me identify it before I identify it. And, that's helped me a lot. But I found that character quality of really what it's tied to is you're not hearing me when I think I'm not being heard. And it goes back to like being in the hallway with my mom and she's beating me, just slapping the crap out of me in my head. and she's screaming at me, and I'm trying to say, stop, right? So in recovery, you get the chance to, I tell that story not to beat her up anymore. She was in rough shape. I'm surprised she didn't take her life, but I learned this thing where I was so full of rage around not being heard, in my family, really with her. It was a loaded relationship that, it was kind of a breakthrough, because I was like, oh, so that's how I learned that behavior. And then there were several years as a teen where we did that all the time. Like, she would beat me in the head. My dad was a pastor at the church just around the corner, and she would call him and she would say, he's out of control, get home. And he would run home and he would play referee. And, I just wanted to be heard. But I was a kid in the closet. I was a little gay kid in a Christian home where they cast demons out of gay people. So it was a very loaded environment, so I'm just glad I got out of there alive. But some of my best traits are from, I connect them to my mom. Some of the best parts of me now that I look at, like, oh my God, I love that part of me. It's totally Nancy connected. My mom's name was Nancy. And there are a lot of those parts of me that I just totally dig. And, so over time I grew grateful for her and all of her complications, as well as mine, as a person who made it through, got to the other side. I remain incredibly grateful that I've been able to put the pieces together. And so, sometimes people go, Brad, what is the 12-step program? What is it? And literally, as the name might imply, there are 12 steps.
Right.
And there's sort of like action steps that you do. So it's education and then action to do the step. And then you do all of them. And then when you're done, you're supposed to be different. That's the 12th one, is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of the last 11. You're going to go out and do better, right? You're going to help other people. And that's how it worked for me. I really had a remarkable experience where I did the homework. I showed up. I made it through the tears. I made it through the rage and the sharp elbows. And I came out of it on the other side with this incredible gratitude and hunger to not do what I did before. And that included, I never wanted to work in TV again, at least the weather. I'd gone to Mississippi State and their meteorology program, and I was sure that I never wanted to do the weather on television again. And except on a couple book tours when they think it's funny, and they'll go, hey, Brad, you want to do the weather today? And I'll go do the weather. I don't do the weather except for my friends and family. I'm like, I'm looking at the Doppler, go in the house, stuff like that. But
that's funny.
But it's not a straight line for most of us.
Yeah.
But I haven't got low. I haven't used meth. I haven't drank. I quit smoking, and I learned to live without that stuff. But it was a doozy.
It's a hard one. I know with my own. It's been 17 years almost since I've had a drink, and that was my
congratulations. That's a big thing,
It's exciting. It is a big one. It's funny. I post a lot about it, obviously, and somebody said to me, I said I'm still in recovery, and they said, I think you're past recovery. I'm like, no, because yes, I've passed all the steps and everything else, but I'm still. This is me now. Like I'm still recovering. So they said, well, is that because you can't ever drink again? I'm like, no, it's why? Because I can drink if I want to. No one's stopping me from drinking again. My recovery is I'm not drinking again. Nothing's stopping that but me. Right? It's like I can drink, just I don't want it.
I fell in love in recovery and ended up marrying a guy called Scott. And we were friends. We were friends from the 90s, early 90s. And when I got sober, he was delighted that I was in recovery, but he actually didn't know. He thought I drank a bit, but he didn't. like most people in my life, they didn't know the nature of what ailed me. They saw me and I put on my best face. But when we got engaged, I did warn him, and I warned him and said, if I begin drinking, it is likely that I'll begin doing meth again, and you should change the locks and deal with my lawyer because it will not be good, really. And I stick to that. If I start drinking, I believe that soon after I will try a little meth because that's what I did because it made me feel good. And and just like I walk down the street sometimes and smell a cloud of cigarette smoke, and I want to like have it, knock the person down and have it, even though I'm a total non-smoker. And I've done the work so I don't, normally think I want to have a cigarette. But, I think it's good for us to keep that idea in mind that, one, I can do whatever I want. And if I go back to doing that stuff, change the locks and call the attorney because it ain't good. In fact, when I started Breathe Life Healing Center in LA almost 10 years ago, I had seen some other treatment programs blow up because their founder got loaded. Right. And so I said, and I'm proud of this, and I think it was the universe like inspiring me to do this, that in the operating agreement, we built into it that if my CEO and partner ever thought that I was getting loaded, she could ask for a drug test, a 36-panel drug test, and which is not a drug test like this, which is like 18-panel. And until it's worked out, I can't come in the office. I lose my signatory on accounts because I wanted to stay accountable and know that front of mind, I am the greatest threat to my success and my recovery and my life. It's not somebody outside. It's not the competition. Yeah. It's not somebody down the street. It's not the economy. It's not politics. It's not the insurance companies. It's me. And so I don't know that kept me in recovery the last 10 years. But there have been times that I thought, God, I'm glad I advocated for that because I know that I want to stay accountable as a man in long-term recovery. Sometimes I'll say I'm recovered, and on those days I believe that, and yet, like, I want to stay accountable to people. I want to stay vulnerable to people, and I'm going to build it in. If I have a business relationship with you, I'm committed to building it into the contracts because if I turn and return to the previous life, I want you to be protected because I am a crafty, deceitful, like I'm good at that stuff. I am really good at that stuff and I don't do it anymore.
It's a talent for...
I went to the dark side. He is your father, Luke. And here we are as, guys in long-term recovery that get to, have another glorious day and help others.
And it's the glorious days, and it's looking at it where, like you said, it's can quickly turn. I have my best friend who in recovery has a treatment center actually out in Montreal. When he was working before that, he was working at a rehab center, and he'd spoken to his colleagues, and he was okay because cocaine was his problem. So he should be able to handle drinking. And I found that out about a year later. And I said, how many days after that first drink that everyone said you'd be okay with a handle, did you go full bore from just a beer at dinner? He goes, it'll be 5 days to have vodka in the water bottle pushing the stroller down the street. And 12 more days for me to be back on cocaine. Like, boom, 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 boom.
Though, too, you and I have both been in recovery long enough that, and maybe you've seen this, I have. I've seen people that I know and respect in recovery when I was younger in recovery that now do drink, that have left 12-step, abstinence recovery. And at times it's prompted the question, like, God, I wonder if I could drink. And I'm pretty clear, consistently, I'm pretty clear. I was not a quality drinker. I
Yeah.
was a problem drinker. And so, I try not to compare myself to that, but I'm really risk adverse. I don't gamble because I don't like losing like that.
Yep.
And I think the odds are that I've used up most of my Brad Lamm luck already. And I don't think I have a lot of luck in that area anymore. And it's too risky.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I could drink socially, but it's really risky, and I don't want to try it because I love my life, and I'm not a gambler.
Yeah, I'm not a gambler either, which is why I used to people say, you never go to the casino. I'm like, I have so many vices in my life. Really, I don't need to tempt fate of anything else. I was good. So let me.
You want to hear something cool?
Yeah.
So I'm at this house in Provincetown, Massachusetts, which was actually the first place that the Pilgrims landed, and then they left because it was too isolated. Yeah. It's the tip of Cape Cod. It's all the way at the tip. But I've been working on this house for the last 2 years, and I just moved in July, so I spent a lot of time up here. And these boards on the floor and the doors and stuff, they're original from 1779, and we were able to restore them. And you can't really see, but there's this beam on the, it's just like there was all this amazing goodness once the walls and all the stuff that was put up to cover it up came down. And, it's like, it reminds me just of how, what's underneath us, that there's this amazing opportunity and possibility for us when we give it a go. And for people that love somebody who suffers, it's hard to stay motivated to help people because we get worn down too, because we hear them say no and we think that's the end of the story, and we're not going to try to keep doing the renovation when they're not interested in the renovation, and so I love this because it's a reminder of I'm going to live and die. This place was built in 1779. There's a lot that I'm so insignificant in the scheme of things.
Yeah.
That it's like a good reminder for me. But it was a really good project for me too, just spiritually, to slow down a little bit.
Of course.
Well, I go back to LA in a few weeks, and I'm back at it.
So let's go to this. So you've gone through recovery 10 years ago. You opened up Breathe Life Rehab Center.
Yeah.
What happened? So before we get there, what happened when you got through recovery up until 10 years ago? What did you do? You got
oh my God! So at 2 years sober, I went away to write a book. Literally, I went away with my backpack and a laptop, and I was going to finish my book. I was so determined that what I had found was a jewel that I could share with others. It was going to change the world. So I started doing interventions. I trained with an amazing mentor, Dr. Judith Landau, who developed what's called the Arise Intervention Protocol. It's an invitational intervention. It's amazing. But it comes from these Arise studies that came out of the University of Pennsylvania. So I was full up on gas that this is amazing, an invitational intervention that's nuts, and yet I found it was so beautiful, and it was helping change lives in a way that didn't stress me out, which, come on, if the interventionist isn't stressed out, that's pretty good. And so I wrote this book and I sold it, and it was really exciting. It was called, my first book was How to Change Someone You Love. And it's the idea was to turn the notion of change on its ear. We hear so often, you can't change somebody. They have to want to be ready for change. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, etc. All these myths around change. And so this led to a conversation that landed me on my first Oprah show. And so I was in Chicago, and by then I'm probably 4 years in recovery, and I'm in Chicago. I have a really cute new pair of shoes I got for my first Oprah show, And I remember I had done an intervention with a well-known person, and it had been. And remember, like I didn't just do the weather. I produced news for years in New York, and so when I found this jewel, and I started telling recovery stories, and I knew Oprah from before when I was younger, and that's a whole nother story. But I worked on The Color Purple when I was in college. So and the theme of life is nuts. You never know. Um, so I did this intervention, and the idea was we're really going to tell this story about one invitational intervention and how surprise intervention you didn't need to blow up the house to help somebody. An intervention need not be nuclear. So I did this intervention with this person, and we're at the studio, and Oprah and I are looking at the pre-tape package. And my publisher has paid me a good amount of money for this book, and I'm on the Oprah show, and the next week I'm going to be on Good Morning America. And Oprah said, "How is she?" Meaning this person, the actor. And she was there, but Oprah hadn't talked to her yet. And I said, she's doing pretty good, but, I got to tell you, I just don't know. And she said, well, is this going to help or hurt her recovery doing this show? And mind you, 150 people in the studio. They shoot two shows a day. And it's a big deal. It's my big shot.
Yeah.
It's going to change my life. And I said, I got to be honest. I don't know, but if I had to answer it, I said, I think it's going to put too much a spotlight on her, and it scares me a little. The last few days, I've been scared about it. And she said, we got to listen to that. Should we not do the show? And I swear, Matt, and I haven't told this story before. Even as I knew the people outside the room would scream,
yeah,
I just knew that was the right thing to do. And I will say it was confirmed by real life, because a few weeks later, there was an event where the police were called and bones were broken. It was very, very bad. And I stayed in touch with that person, and she's in good shape today. But I don't regret that. Mm-hmm. And it was a huge failure in my life, and it changed a lot,
Of course.
But you just never know, because you just never know, but I don't regret it. I really, in recovery, I work to not do things that I'm going to regret. And as I've told stories on television over the years, whether it's Today Show, GMA, Good Morning America, Oz Show, Dr. Phil, back when Oz wasn't, a Trump-loving lunatic. Really, he changed my life too. I was part of his team for the first 5 years of that show. And, people don't change. Yes, they do.
They do.
Yes, they do. But I kept that same commitment whenever I would do a story for TV. I would say, if it's not working, you have to allow me to say we're not going to air it. And I never did a show that I didn't have that ability. And I killed one Good Morning America story that my publisher wanted to kill me about. But I've really stayed true to that, and I still have those shoes, and I have never worn them again. And they sit in my closet, and they're really cool shoes, and they were like $1,100. I'd never paid so much for a shoe. But I want to remember that my life is as much about what I say no to as what I say yes to, and that's as a man in long-term recovery. And I will say it probably deepened my relationship with Oprah and allowed me to do other things with her too. But that was a scary day, just because there was outside pressure from the publisher and stuff.
Of course, but, they want you to be a star in the book and everything else, but you also have to live to who you are.
Books have shipped Books are in warehouses.
They got to sell.
Yeah. But you know what? I sold 5 more books. I've written 6 books. I love writing. I continue to do it. I've never had a hit. I mean, I've sold a lot of books, but I've never had a New York Times bestseller. But I love my life and I keep writing because I've discovered that, it's about the work and what it accomplishes. It's not necessarily about the outcome because, like, for example, there are lots of amazing painters in the world and, like this person, and it's hard to be an artist. I have friends who are artists, they make, complicated life work all the time. And like such a small percentage of amazing artists ever get discovered and are collected and, appreciated on some grand level. And, but I definitely have learned that, boy, life is as much about what I say no to as yes. And that sure has been the case for me the last 20 years.
I love it. It's awesome. So you've become an interventionist. You've been on Oprah. You've got these books. And now we're fast forward. So you decide to open up Breathe Life, or it was already there?
Yeah. Well, I got married, which was kind of a big deal because I never thought I would get married. Being a young, closeted gay guy. And then I'm in recovery. I fell in love. It was really good. I asked him to marry me. I invite my family. He invites his family. It was really special. It was one of those days that as a kid, I never imagined would be possible unless I moved to some island like Malta, where gay marriage is legal in Malta or something. And it was really beautiful. And I think just it's fun to look at my life and do like a little inventory on what are the pillars that have really shifted my appreciation and understanding of life. But I would say that the relationship that I built with my sponsor in the 12-step program, that's the person that kind of helps you. You say, hey, will you be my sponsor? Help me do these 12 steps. That relationship changed the way I had relationship with other people, romantically, work-wise, friendship-wise. Like it really shifted how I had friendships, how I was in relationship with people. So getting married was really a powerful moment for me, and I think I kept falling into myself in new and beautiful ways. But that's just one of the joys of if you stay on this track and keep trying to get better, you'll fill up the space with more good and you push the bad parts out.
Right.
And it doesn't mean I won't get hit by a car tomorrow. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that there's some grand scheme for my life. It just means that I'm going to keep being committed to the possibility of being better and see where that takes me. So I had this idea, I did a lot of interventions. So I built this intervention practice. I sold a good bunch of books. I was doing some teaching. Training clinicians on how to do this kind of intervention that I do. And, one of the biggest hurdles when you try to help someone with treatment was, and is, the financial reality of the family. And so for rich folks, it was always such a, I'm going to take them to the Meadows. That was my secret sauce. To people in the Meadows all the time. It's an amazing trauma center. It's in Wickenburg, Arizona. It's also very expensive. At that time, no insurance was taken. So I had this idea that wouldn't it be great if there could be a trauma treatment center that took insurance? And, that was the impetus for Breathe Life Healing Center, was an integrated subacute trauma center that took insurance. And I asked this woman, Deb Hughes, who she had built this amazing treatment center called the Rosewood Center for Eating Disorders. And I got to know her well, and we did a lot of work together. And so we opened Breathe in LA. And I have to tell you, that's the best thing I've ever been part of. Hands down. It's helped thousands and thousands of people. I'm really proud of it. It's almost failed a number of times. It's really hard. It's not hard. It's not so hard today. Like today isn't a hard day. But it's really hard running a 70-bed subacute trauma center that takes insurance.
Yeah.
And, but it's, I'm so grateful that I gave it a chance because it was really like a dream. And there were a couple people that were in my life. One couple sat me down and they were like, "You shouldn't open a treatment center. You're out of your league. You're gonna relapse." And I just said, "Okay, I totally hear you. I'm going to do my best, and I take your caution, and I'm going to do this, that, and the other, and we'll see how it goes." And really, it has been the best, other than my marriage, really, which I would say I count that as one of the great things of life. Both just in I was surprised that we could get married and that I have had an abiding, connected, uninterrupted love with another human being and made a life for myself. And Breathe is in that category. It's called Breathe Life Healing Center. That's pretty great. And I get to work with some of the best healers on the planet. So
That's amazing.
That's Breathe.
That's amazing. So with that being said, you got Breathe, and then so let me ask you a question. Over the years, being an interventionist, how much has it changed? What's changed over the years from when you started to where you are now to how it's done?
Oh, it's such a good question. One, I am quicker. When I was starting out, I was slower and I would take more time in the intervention because I was kind of confused that I thought that the intervention had more power than it actually has. What I've come to learn is the intervention really is just to get the person to say yes, to leverage the family to help them say yes and get them out the door to some kind of help. That the family's not going to help the person. The family's not the doctor. So I've gotten quicker. So I'm a swifter interventionist.
Okay.
Maybe apples and oranges. When I started, I was practicing the surprise intervention. I trained in that. It wasn't for me, Matt, and here's why. The surprise part of it, I found too anxiety producing, and I would get sick after interventions. I would feel like I had the flu. And so I had decided that I was done. I took my last intervention. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was thinking that I might, I had a school catering company in Washington, D.C. That was my sober job as I did that. And I thought, well, I'm going to do that again in New York. That's what I'm going to do. And I had a website that parents had a nutritionist, and it was called Ask Dr. Apple, and all the craziness that takes place between these ears. That's what I was going to go back to because I liked it enough. I made a nice living at it. I thought that's what I'll do. Intervention is not for me. I met Dr. Landau. She introduced me to this kind of intervention, and I gave it a shot. I didn't actually believe it would work because I was incredulous that a person would be invited to their own intervention and they would show up. But I tried it, and I began working with her, and it really did change my life. So one, I'm swifter. Two, I only do these invitation-based interventions with families. And it doesn't mean I'm not scrappy, that I don't still sometimes cut somebody's tires or take the battery out of their car or, call the boss and have them there in the parking lot, as backup. And I'm still crafty, but I really am committed to only using as much pressure as needed and let the treatment professionals take it from there.
100%. So let me ask you, you've had, as an interventionist, because I really want to focus just a few minutes on this. It seems scary, especially doing the kind of surprise ones. And let's be honest, no one likes a surprise party in general. So I can imagine a surprise intervention. Nobody likes a surprise party. Surprise intervention's got to be so much worse for everybody involved. It seems scary. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were, not just to build up beforehand, but just were you ever were injured or anything happened within an intervention?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When I get ready for an intervention, one of the questions I always ask is, I go assumptive because 42% of American homes have at least one gun. I go assumptive and say, well, how many guns are in the house? And often a no gun family will say, no guns. What are you, nuts?
Right.
And the gun families will be like, oh, 3, and then a 4th in the truck. And so I asked that question because it's really important that we make it as safe and stable as possible. And there was one time that when I do an intervention, Matt, I usually sit on the floor. It's part of my shtick.
Okay.
It puts me lower than the rest of the family, and there is some value to that where I'm not on the offense, but in fact I'm usually I lean back and I sit on the floor, and so we had asked the guy to go to treatment, and he had almost said yes, and I remember getting on I was crouched on my feet. I kind of sat up, and I turned, and I was thinking, I felt something on my head, and he had spit on me, and then as I turned, he was running at me, and he tackled me, and he was choking me. And I'm a Quaker, so I'm not a person. I've been in 2 fights in my life. Like, I got hit once and fell down. That was the fight. Yeah. And Lamm is down. And so it didn't so much scare me. It just really surprised me. And then once the brothers pulled him off me, I said, you now have 2 choices. You're going to jail, and I'm calling 911, or you're going to treatment right now. And the mother said, no, you can't. You can't call 911. I said, do I have marks on my neck? And she goes, yes, you have lots of marks on your neck. I said, I'm calling the police. And we called the police, and he went away in the back of a police car that day. And then my goal was really to then go to the police station and follow up with the intervention at the police station, so that he was released to his brothers and that we would caravan to treatment. But like in that case, I didn't drive that guy to treatment.
Right.
Because he had been violent with me. But usually, I like to take the person to treatment. It's a really powerful relationship building part of the intervention.
That's correct. That's awesome. It was funny. So on the opposite side, when I got out of the rehab, so when I was in rehab, we had a counselor, like a therapist in the room with us, where it was 10 guys. One guy got kicked out because he drank. We voted to kick him out because he drank. And his argument was, but I'm not a drinker. My problem is heroin. We're like, okay, you're out. And I actually saw her. Voted off the island. Yeah, he was voted off the island. So I actually ran into her. It was funny. I ran into her years later at my school. Her kids were in the same school, and because it was so intense and so tight, and in those time that I was there, and she hadn't seen me in years. She just was like, "Oh my God, how are you doing?" And I'm like, no one here knows that I know you, and they all know what you do. Right? And she felt so bad afterwards, and that actually is funny. That actually, hearing from her afterwards, she said, I was just so proud to see you. So almost the opposite of you taking them to the intervention. She got to see me after all of it. So she's like, it's so powerful. She said, I don't always see anybody. I never see anybody after they've left. Right? And that actually sparked me to write my very first article about my addiction, my recovery. Just that one conversation with her. But from there, doing interventions, what separates you? Because you're an American interventionist, you're been on Oprah, you have a lot of people you know. What's the difference between doing an intervention with a regular soccer mom and a celebrity? Is there a difference that you do?
Yeah, I think there are similarities in that the similarities are they're human. They're 2 humans. There's things that aren't similar. It's more akin. That celebrity intervention is more akin to like a really high-producing executive, where there's so much writing on them from an outside entity that it's a little different in that way. That the yes is more nuanced and there are more hands involved. I'll use an example. I do a good amount of movies being made, and one of the actors overdoses on the set. they'll call us. We'll go in and do with a doctor, with a nurse, with the therapist. We'll go in and do an onset assessment and testing system. Now, in that case, you'd think, oh, the person's totally going to say yes. It's going to be super easy. No, because you have the insurance company that works for the studio, and they don't want to keep paying a claim because it's a lot. It can be.
Yeah.
The last one I did, it was like $500,000 a day that the set was shut down, and so they don't want that to have a long tail. The director wants the person to be okay. In this case, then there's the manager and the agent who have different motives. Mm-hmm. Then there's the sober coach that they used on the last movie that lets him drink but doesn't let him do this other thing. So it's a different system. I would say the soccer mom is much easier.
Right.
But both involve the possibility of recovery. But the celebrity is harder. The other thing about that person is, there is no anonymity for some of these people that are clients, and I think that's a hard thing. But I've also had clients that just grab it by the hair and honor it, and we walk into 12-step meetings while we're on off from the set, and they just I've seen them navigate it with real grace and dignity. But I've seen it go all different ways. But the soccer mom is definitely easier. It's swifter. Sure.
And there's less parts. There's less moving parts to deal with. So I got a question before you. I want to be respectful of your time, and I really want to wrap this up for you. But you had given me a question that we talked about before. Predestined to be addicted when we grow up. Is it more nature versus nurture? I asked that question. So I had addiction with alcohol and cigarettes as well, and probably, Haagen-Dazs chocolate peanut butter ice cream at one point in time, right? I was adopted, and I look at the nurture versus nature part of it, where there were lots of things, trauma. There's a lot there that hit all the check marks and the boxes for my addiction. But at the same time, I actually discovered my birth family about 3 or 4 years ago. Met my birth mother passed away, but met a half sister of mine who lives across the world. Who
really, literally across the world?
I woke up New Year's Day. So I did the DNA test, and none of the companies talk to one another, and third party company you can upload your stuff to. So I uploaded my stuff, and we said, upload it, you never know, because this doesn't talk to that one, and so you get more possibility.
Oh, it's so cool.
I woke up New Year's Day to an email that said, hi, based on this, Happy New Year's, based on this, I'm either your great aunt, your aunt, or your half sister. I'm born in Australia. I'm 10 years older than right? 10 years older than you. And according to this, we're related. And I said, well,
and I need $10,000.
Right. Well, that was, I sat there on the email for like 3 hours going, I don't even know how to respond to this. And then responded.
How exciting.
It was exciting. I said, thank you very much for your email. Happy New Year. I don't think there's a lot of women going around from continent to continent, from Australia to Canada, having babies, giving birth, and moving on. And anyway, so turns out we are related. She's my half sister, and she'd actually met our birth mother, and she said, she had an addiction to alcohol. Okay. And so then I started saying, well, I checked all these boxes for trauma and addiction over here in my nurture. But yet I've got an addictive mother, and probably, from what I can understand, a lot of a chain line of hereditary addiction, thinking, did I just get the mother load? Or,
right.
Do you see that nature versus nurture is different when it comes to addiction? Are we predestined to this?
Well, some people don't know because, as in your case, you're adopted, and unless the luck of the draw allows a connection from whence you came. But I think it's both situational and generational. It's probably both. the longer I live and the more I work with people, I sure see. Have you ever done a genogram for your family?
No.
It's really cool to do. If you Google Brad Lamm and family map, which is what I call a genogram, there's a video on YouTube that'll step you through how to do it.
Okay.
And it's a really cool exercise. It's like an art therapy exercise in making your family map, which, again, sociologists would call it a genogram, but I call it a family map. But it helps you connect some of the dots, both the triumphs, the tragedies, some of the trends in the life of the family. And with the discovery of your birth sister or half sister, it's pretty cool. I mean, if you were able to flesh it out a little. But when I do an intervention, I always use a family map and try to get the family involved in it. Sometimes families aren't interested at all,
right?
Which is aggravating because I'm such a believer in it. I'm a believer, but sometimes you can't get them to drink the water. But it's a really fun exercise to do, and it really helps answer some of the questions that all of us have. Like, God, am I the black sheep, or are there other black sheep, or fill in the blank. One thing that I learned in doing my family map and writing my first book is that my maternal grandmother was not dead. We were raised being told that she had died when my mom was 2 years old, but that in fact she was alive and lived very close to us in Eugene, Oregon, which is where I grew up. But she was in the Oregon State Mental Hospital for 52 years. And she was admitted by my grandfather in 1934, and we were able to, with public information requests, we were able to get all of her records, find out where she had died subsequently. She was given a J-hook lobotomy in the 50s, and she was pretty totaled and beat up when she was released in the early 70s, lived in a halfway house, and then died in 76. But we were able to find out she'd been buried in a pauper's grave, and we learned more about her. And my brothers and I got a headstone for her, and it helped us close that chapter differently than what we'd ever thought. And really, that came out of the family map. That was like, oh, I'm making this family map, and I asked my mother's fifth stepmother's adoptive mother, right? So this woman that I'm not even related to by blood, but I called her great grandma growing up. She was my mother's fifth stepmother's adoptive mother.
Wow.
And when I was asking her about my family map, she said, Enid is alive. And I was like, Grandma Enid is alive? What are you talking about? Right? And sometimes you get little gems like that.
Yeah.
And it opens up the possibility of, maybe left, not right. Maybe I can learn more. And, I could go on and on about what I learned from my family map. But suffice it to say that I know that there are real trends in my family, both mental health and the use of drugs and alcohol to self-soothe,
right?
Anxiety and depression, and so we're good at it. And so I need to be good at the recovery because the Lambs are really good at that.
They're good at
being alcoholics.
They're good at it. All right.
So you should try it. Check it out. If you do it, send it to me. Take a picture of it and send it to me, and I'll call you. We'll chat on it.
Awesome. I definitely will. It's definitely on my plan for this week. I want to get it done. So before you go,
it doesn't have to be pretty. And if you spend more than an hour on it, unless you're talking to other family members, you're overthinking it.
Okay, so don't overthink it. Because we have a tendency of doing that,
Yeah. 10 hours, it's 5 pages.
Right. And scratched it off. All right. Brad, I really want to say there's so much more I want to talk to you about, but I want to be respectful of your time.
It's so good to see you. You are one of my heroes in Canada. I know a few people in Canada, and I love the way you say some of your words. And I follow you on social media too, Samra. I love the message that you're putting out there, and it's really awesome. And I love seeing you on social as a father in recovery too. I think that's a really powerful message.
It is for my kids. I appreciate that. For my kids, it's really funny. We've normalized it to the point of it's a conversation we can have. I remember last year for my 16th anniversary of being sober, my middle son said, I know what we should do. For your sober-versary, we should get you your favorite wine. So we've wrapped humor around it as much as we possibly can. You don't get it.
Yeah.
He's like, I totally get it. Then we joked about it with my oldest son just this year. He's in university for the first year. We've brought him a mini fridge for his room. And, there I am. Me.
Oh my God.
Brothers, me on my knees, shoving drinks, mixed hard lemonades into this fridge. I'm like, anybody see the problem that I'm the one smuggling booze into a room?
Yes.
But we've normalized where the conversation is going to be there, right? So we try. We try to make sure
so cool,
as fun as possible to a point. But thank you very much. I appreciate all those words. I appreciate you taking your time. People can find you at bradlamm.com.
Yep. Anywhere
else? Or that takes you at...
Oh, it'll take you to my other sites, intervention.com and Breathe Life Healing Center. And
Awesome.
If you are without hope and you love somebody who's suffering, read a little bit of what I've written. It may empower you to try to help them in a different way. I really believe in the power of intervention and help looking at the word no as a conversation starter. So, be encouraged if you're one of those people that there's so many of us who love somebody who's suffering.
I always say it's not no, it's not now.
Right on.
Right? So and if not now may just be meaning in this second, because I'm going to get you there eventually. So I want to thank
like an appetizer. No is the appetizer.
Exactly. So, Brad, thank you so much. Stick around afterwards. I have more questions for you and we're done, but I want to sign off and thank you everybody for joining us today. Reach out to Brad if you need anything on social media. Follow him. He's got great tips. Get his books. Learn more about him. And if he can help, you're there to help. Awesome, Brad. Thank you so much.
You're listening to Rise Up, Stories of Recovery, Resilience, and Renewal with Matthew Taub.